We will get going with this webinar in a couple of minutes' time. There's a lot of people still joining us. You can see Ben, our participant from Cape Wrath Ultra. We'll be chatting with Ben later. Bridget, our Dragon's Back participant, is going to be joining us momentarily, we think. My colleague Eleanor is doing the admin this evening. I'll just chat about a bit of housekeeping. So there's a chat function and there's a Q&A function. So in the chat function, why don't you use that just to chat amongst yourselves? Why don't you say where you're from, or say hello, but use the Q&A for specific questions. So I'm going to just say, hello, everyone. Coming direct from Kendal. Hopefully I've spelled that right. Probably not. So yeah, so I've just put a little message in the chat function. So as we go through this evening, Eleanor will answer as many Q&A questions that come up as they come up in real time. So if Eleanor can answer them straight away, perhaps provide you with a link to the relevant page on the website, Eleanor will do that. Any questions that we don't manage to cover during the webinar, or you would maybe specifically like to ask Ben or Bridget, we'll save them up to the end, and there'll be plenty of time to run through those at the end. We're expecting, well, we won't take any more than 90 minutes. So we'll have a kind of discussion with Ben and Bridget first, and then we'll cover all of the Q&A questions or your questions that we haven't managed to cover within the conversation that we're going to have. I think we're just waiting to find Bridget, aren't we?
She hasn't appeared yet. I'm just making sure she's got the link. I'm resending that to her now.
Okay.
Should have the link. I will just resend that to her.
Okay, so we're just waiting for Bridget to join us, and then we'll get going. So we were in a separate Teams chat just before we joined this one, just kind of having a quick conversation before we're getting started here, and Bridget hasn't made the teleportation from one chat to the other, so hopefully we'll manage to get that sorted very shortly. So maybe in the chat, you can write whether you've got snow or not. So it is -6 in Kendal. We're actually just outside Kendal, a rural location, and we have got plenty of snow here, that is for sure. Icy North Wales. You'll have to excuse my sniffing as well. I have got a mild cold, so I'm doing a little bit of sniffing. So excuse that. Right. So
do you want to make a start? Just I'm sure she'll be joining us in a second. She's probably just lost the link, so
okay, well, we'll get started. So Ben, hi. I'm just actually gonna I always assume that everyone in these webinars has a real understanding of the events themselves, so maybe I'll just start with a brief roundup of where we are with a description of the Dragon's Back and Cape Wrath Ultra. So the Dragon's Back is a 6-day expedition race through Wales. So you start at Conway Castle in the north and you arrive at Cardiff Castle 380 kilometres later on the south coast of Wales. So you're pretty much within hundreds of meters go coast to coast, and you also visit most of the major mountain summits along the way. It's quite different in some respects to Cape Wrath Ultra, because the Cape Wrath Ultra, which Ben did this year, actually weaves through the Scottish Glens. So Dragon's Back, you're going summit to summit. Cape Wrath Ultra, you're weaving through the glens. Cape Wrath Ultra is further, it's 400 kilometers, but over 8 days. Generally speaking, people seem to think it's a little bit easier than the Dragon's Back. So, Ben, I know you've not done the Dragon's Back, but why
No,
don't
not
you
yet.
tell us about your experience generally? What made you sign up for Cape Wrath?
Well, my story is like I want to say, and I kind of hold to this, that I was coaxed into it by my good friend Ian Stewart, who won it the previous year, and his wife Laura was doing it. So I think it was kind of like a bit of a nudge, like go on, do it, do it, do it. So it was like, oh, I don't know, I don't know. And then I eventually just cracked and then signed up for it. And it was something that's
Right.
been on my radar for a while anyway. But it was one of those races that I never thought I would really commit to doing. And I can honestly say I'm so glad I did, you know. So it was peer pressure that forced me into
Good old-fashioned peer pressure.
it. Yeah.
Okie doke. So why don't you kind of let people know a bit about your background? So first of all, you're a winter mountaineering instructor, so you spend a lot of time in the hills. But how much running had you done? So at the moment you decided, yeah, I'm going to enter Cape Wrath Ultra, kind of where were you with your kind of personal running?
So like as Shane's alluded to there, I work as a mountaineer based up in Scotland here, and I spend a lot of my time up in the mountains, and my kind of running prior to that, I had done quite a few sort of ultra distances from 50 to 100 mile races, so kind of time on feet I was quite comfortable with, and I think I'm in that fortunate position to be spending a lot of time out in the hills and the mountains. So I think all of that accumulated to having a quite a good base level of endurance and fitness for something of that nature, which is the Cape Wrath.
Okay. And I mean, before Bridget, fantastic.
Sorry, I was in a holding room and decided to try to join you again. So here I am now.
Okay, that's great. So Bridget has arrived as well. So just to introduce Bridget and Ben to maybe to the whole group. So Ben finished Cape Wrath Ultra this year, and Bridget finished Dragon's Back. Bridget was first V50 female, second female as well, so a very impressive performance there. Bridget, we were just talking with Ben about what was the nudge to get him to enter Cape Wrath Ultra, and I guess the same question to you would be kind of what was it that made you enter the Dragon's Back?
Well, I'd always been impressed by the Dragon's Back race, and I knew its history, and I had followed it since it had been resurrected. And because I have done essentially a lot of climbing in Snowdonia, but then started to fell run and did a few races, it was always on the agenda. And each year came round, and each year was like, shall I, shan't I, shall I, shan't I? And then the year before I did it, some of my friends did it. Oh, actually, no, I must point out the year you introduced it to being a 6-day race, my
Yeah.
heart sank. And I thought, oh no, the 5th day is grueling. So, but then my friends ran it, and I was nearly to doing it that year. Thank God I didn't, because that heat wave hit. And then I thought, well, I cannot put it off any longer. I have got to know, can I do it or can I not do it? Let's just enter it. So before the week of them finishing the Dragon's Back was out, I'd committed in my mind that I was going to enter it, and I think it's just the history of the race, and it's Snowdonia. Well, it's Wales, which is the top half is my home turf, so it kind of had been calling out to me for years.
Right. What I think about in terms of these events is kind of, if not now, when, from a participant's perspective, because I think when the challenge of the event is so enormous, it's very easy to say, oh, maybe next year. But I think, very quickly those opportunities go by, and I would I would always encourage people to have a go. Bridget, we were asking Ben about where he was kind of with his running at the moment he decided to enter. So kind of same question to you, really. So, when you hit enter, were you feeling super prepared? Were you already banking many kilometers every week? I mean, how were you with your kind of running at that point?
I think my experience of the mountains was already there.
Yeah.
But I'd only done the odd mountain marathon from several years previous, so I knew that entering a race of multi-day it was almost like a new thing for me, and so that was the adrenaline hit for me. Could I manage a multi-day event? But days out in the mountains and navigation and certainly knowing the rockier parts of the race, I'd already completed a Bob Graham in 2015. I had done a Paddy Buckley, but wasn't happy enough, so I was already down to do another Paddy Buckley. So the training was there, and I knew a lot of the first 2 days, and I'd kind of been over various bits of the rest of the race just for fun at various times. But on the day I entered the race, it was the day that the training seriously began, and I knew straight away I had to up my game, and I did right from that first day. Not only did I up my game, I did a lot of research around nutrition, what other training I had to do, how to keep myself injury free during the year as well.
It sounds from the answers both of you have given, you're bringing a lot of experience before you even signed up to just being in the mountains and getting your events done. And I think that's always a position of strength as you come to these big challenging events. But you must have had certain things that you were worried about. So maybe if I ask Ben first, what was the number one thing on your radar pre-event, the unknown, for example, that you were concerned about?
Yeah, so I think for me, probably similar to Bridget, maybe it was just that unknown of continue, like back-to-back days. I mean, working for I kind of work part-time and a bit of freelance for Trail Running Scotland, and we kind of do these kind of recce runs around some parts of the Cape Wrath and things like that. And we've done kind of 5-day tours, kind of picking out some best bits of the Scottish Highlands. So I knew that I've got the ability, to do 5 days back to back. But obviously the distances that we do are, on a smaller scale, but it's still 5 days consecutively in the mountain environment, running out for 5-6 hours. So I think the unknown quantity was, well, the Cape Wrath's 8 days and they're bigger days, and I think that kind of mental aspect as well is a big part of that. So there's those unknowns over that extended period of time, which I just didn't know because I'd never experienced anything to that scale before. But I was comfortable knowing that I can manage 5 days, but what's it like adding more time onto that and more distance onto that? I just don't know. So that was definitely a big unknown.
Okay, and Bridget, same question to you, the sort of your concerns, worries pre-event.
Well, I can't add more to what Ben said about the back-to-back days. That was a great unknown and something that I didn't know how to tackle. But another thing that concerned me, and I spent a lot of time agonizing over what food to eat during the day, because I loved hot cross buns when I was out on the run, and hot cross buns they're not going to go down well after 2 or 3 days. After hot cross buns, I loved ice buns, and I loved my sandwiches, and it's just like, so I had to, as the year went on, I rethought all my ideas about food and what to take with me. So that was a great concern, but luckily I have had friends who've done it, and I did take a little bit of a questionnaire to most of them, say, what did you eat? And that really helped.
Okay. Well, it seems relevant to ask then. So what did you eat then? I mean, I know people will be interested in that.
Well, I'm still partial to the odd hot cross bun, which is great hill food. But no, it's bad news for all you lot that are worried about spending your money, because sadly enough, over the year, I found out that all those dead expensive sports nutritional things, they do work and they are worth spending your money on. So it was a combination of, and I've got a few little things to show you. So I really enjoyed chewy things like that. There you go. Oh, can you see it? There you go. They taste really weird, but you can always get them down. And apparently they're better than gels, because I researched you got to have carbs, but you got to have protein, and they have the lot. These, I never believed these would work. Cliff Blocks. Everyone's had Cliff Blocks. They do work. I discovered these worked about half an hour into the first day. I was bricking it on the start line, and I knew I had to eat, and I did not feel like anything. But you can pop one of those in your mouth and not chew it, and it just goes down. That's great. These really strange Room bars, really strange, but they go down okay. Cost a fortune, but one of those will keep you going for 2 hours. And also over the course of the week, you learn how long one of these bars is going to last you food wise, and how much you have to keep popping in, which is good. I seem to have kept going M&S because all their nutty bars, somehow I like them, and they went down a treat. But there's also M&S Turkish Delight. I hate Turkish Delight. M&S Turkish Delight, pure sugar. I OD'd, and after day 3, I couldn't manage anymore, but I'm back on it. And one little block will keep you going for about half an hour. And I love energy. You've always got to carry your emergency food. Romney's Kendall Mint Cake. It's you can always manage a bit of Kendall Mint Cake. So there's other things I had as well, and they're the expensive bits. But there's still some cereal bars and stuff like that I would always carry around with me. Oh, and also that's all sweet stuff. Salted cashews and honey roasted cashews and salted almonds with the savoury things, and salted nuts is what I had for the savoury bits in the day. And nuts, I would now take nuts out on the hill with me over my hot cross buns.
Wow.
It works.
Ben, we have to ask you the same question. What were you taking on the hill?
It's so funny that you mentioned hot cross buns, because I did an ultra a few years ago where it was a hot cross bun with cheese in it, and the first one went down really well, but later on it got really hot. My stomach was just, nope, I'm not having any of that. So it's amazing how within the space of a day, what you think can work really well can just totally go against you. But I think for me, for the Cape Wrath, I was probably quite similar to you in terms of using kind of very specific, energy style gels and things like that. So my focus was maybe on Mountain Fuel, kind of very good UK-based company, and their gels, they kind of give you either kind of that liquidy texture or more of a jelly-like substance. So it's a bit more kind of like you're eating something. And for me, they worked a treat, because you actually get a bit of texture. And then I kind of gotten to that point now in my running where I just want to have food that I'm looking forward to eating rather than eating for the sake of eating, because sometimes your stomach and your brain just don't want to work together. Even though you have something that is nutritious, energy-wise, your brain just is like, nope, that sounds revolting. So it's kind of having something that you're really looking forward to eating. So like my real kind of go-to is like a Twix bar or a Boost, that type of thing, because it's, oh yes, I really want to eat that. So things like that mixed in with energy gels, and the same with yourself, like nuts, salty things, those kind of fats, get those in as well. And then I had, for every day, halfway through the day, a bag of hula hoops as well. So that was my kind of little kind of look forward to treat, halfway through each day, right, it's hula hoop time. And out they came, and that was definitely a really good pick-me-up. Just something a bit savory, crunchy, and just something different rather than being overly sweet. And then I think a big thing was like, yeah, just getting a good dose of protein in throughout the day rather than just constant carbs. You need that source of protein. So whether it's like a high protein bar or like beef jerky, just something different as well. So they were kind of my go-to things, and big variety, you know, because you just really don't know what your body will want at a particular time throughout the day, you know. So I think, yeah, variety was a big thing to then sort of keep eating interesting rather than eating for the sake of energy.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with the crisps. One of my treats is salt and vinegar crisps to take on the hill with me for a long day out. So I'd like to ask about your training. Maybe you could just give us a kind of a summary and overview, and we'll start with Bridget about how you built the volume up, or maybe you didn't, but I'm kind of imagining your volume got built up over time as you prepared. So maybe just talk us through that journey and how you prepared.
Yes, I think to start with, I upped the volume, and it was quite shocking on the body, but that's what you have to go through. And you do get used to running tired. So, I mean, ultimately, I was running 10Ks either 3 or 4 days midweek alongside my work, and then was running either it'd be one long run at the weekend of up to say 30 miles, not always 30 miles though, that was probably about the highest factor, and then the other weekend it would be up to 24 miles on the Saturday and then up to 20 miles on the Sunday. But that's a combination of sometimes in the mountains and sometimes local runs at home. Now it's quite interesting that the one day at the weekend doing the longer mileage didn't tire me as much as the 2 days at the weekend doing the slightly shorter mileage. And to start with, I wasn't doing that mileage right from the start. It was kind of building up. So to start with, you might be doing 20 miles on the Saturday, 12 or 15 on the Sunday, and one of them's in the mountains, one of them's at home. So it was really all shaken up.
Yeah.
But faced with the enormity, I knew on the start line I'd be bricking it, and you need to get your anchor of what can you hang your hopes on, what can you hang something on to know you can do this. So I did go to a coach, and it was great, and that was really useful. I went to a coach. He set me a 2-week plan. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. So the 10Ks during the week, it's a mixture of easy runs and speed work runs, which fitted in with my club running as well and running out with my friends. But it also meant that I knew I could trust that the training would lead me to being able to complete it. I wish I'd had that confidence actually on the start line that I'd done the training, I could complete it, because it's the enormity. You need something to base your hopes on, because the enormity is massive.
I think I think what's special about both Dragon's Back and Cape Wrath is the fact that nobody comes to those events with any certainty that they can finish. And I think for me as a race organizer, having uncertainty in the outcome is really critical to that sense of adventure. And a lot of the uncertainty comes from the enormity of the distance, the physically challenging terrain, and that is all part of the challenge. So Ben, same question to you. You know, what did your preparation from a physical training perspective look like?
Yeah. I feel like I'm going to be the really oddball here in the fact that my training was kind of like, I'll just go and do what I feel like doing on the day that I'm going out for a run. Like, I've tried in the past to have a structured program of, right, Monday is going to be this, Tuesday is going to be this. I think because my line of work, because I'm constantly out in the mountains, and I'm in that fortunate position where I do have a lot of time on my feet, that my running is kind of fitted in around those days. So one day might be a slightly quicker 5K, another day might be a longer, slower 20 to 30K, and then just based on how I feel, I might go and do a 30 to 40K day, but that might take me all day. And then other days might just be going out and doing a big day in the hills, grabbing a couple of Munros, or doing a bit of a circuit around the mountains somewhere. So it was very much just going on how I feel rather than trying to have any structure. So I think anybody looking for advice from me, I'm probably the wrong person to kind of sort of do that, because I was the oddball in how I trained, just with being in that fortunate position with my line of work.
I'm quite jealous there, Ben, because you'd have got out on the good weather days, and I got out on every type of weather day.
Well, I think I had to force myself to go out in those bad weather days, because there's obviously that unknown within these races that you have to be prepared, obviously, for those days also.
I think for anyone who's looking for coaching advice, we do have a coaching partner, Missing Link Coaching, for really focused on the Dragon's Back race, but I'm sure they could provide advice generally. And well, in fact, we've worked with 3 partners across these events. May as well mention them all now. So Paul Turney from Missing Link provides coaching advice. Kate Worthington and her team at Raw Adventure do our Dragon's Back recce's in Wales, and they are also, Kate is running our expedition kind of training camp, boot camp weekend in March next year. And then Ian Stewart, who Ben mentioned earlier, is Trail Running Scotland, does the Cape Wrath recce's in Scotland. So there's loads of, if you want to shift the balance of probability in your favor, I would suggest any one of those people are good to talk to. Okay, so next question is, and I'll go to Ben first, actually. So Ben, when you've got such a long build up to an event, it's inevitable that you'll have some kind of problem or injury, a challenge that you faced. Was there anything in particular that made your preparation more difficult?
I think probably I had just a wee kind of niggle just around sort of kind of tight hips, you know, so it was just very focusing on trying to increase the amount of yoga and stretching I was doing prior to the build up to the race, just to keep everything loose. But again, I was very lucky in not kind of having any kind of major problems, so it was just kind of just keeping things loose and just increasing the amount of yoga I was doing at home as well. So I was quite lucky in not going in with any physical inabilities.
Okay. And Bridget, same question to you.
Well, this time last year I did Tour de Helvellyn, and it was great. Came home and I'd sprained my ankle, and it was just like, no, I've sprained my ankle. But sprained ankles 2 weeks, you're back on the feet, so it wasn't so bad. Then 3 months after buying a lovely new car, someone went into the back of me, and I was sat in my trashed car, and the first thing that went through my mind wasn't what's happened to my lovely car, was, oh my God, I'm training tomorrow. How am I going to get to the hills? And I did get to the hills, but I had to curb my training that day. And then everyone's going to have COVID at some point. I did catch COVID. Thankfully, I had it really mild, and I did keep on training at a very lesser degree that week. So a few setbacks, but luckily not too much. But Ben's mentioned doing yoga and stretching, and you've got to get into a routine to exercise those, stretch out those tired muscles, because I think that played a massive part in not getting injured along the way. Foam rollers, they cost about £3 to £4, and I think they're marvelous.
Yeah, I think there's I've just actually today come from the Running Industry Alliance conference, and there was various experts talking about training and staying fit, and they were talking about the importance of strength and conditioning and a variety of training rather than just run. And I'm often guilty personally of, when I've got a bit of time, I go running, when actually in terms of the longevity of the running, I'd probably be better off doing a little bit more yoga, stretching, strength and conditioning. So anyhow, highlights. We'll jump back to Ben. So you're at Cape Wrath, and when you reflect back, where are we 7 months later? Is there a highlight that really stands out for you?
Good question. It's hard to pinpoint like one like amazing moment, because when you spend that time looking back, it's all amazing. Like there's no just one standout day. I think you know, the whole experience for me was just outstanding. Yeah, it's really hard to sort of answer that one. I guess kind of a standout day that will probably be ingrained in my mind is day 4 coming around the back of Corridon and Ben A. The weather, you could only describe it as biblical, with the amount of rain and kind of how bad that weather was. It was definitely a day of like suffering, but once you got to the camp, it was like, that was hard work, but it was amazing, you know. But yeah, I think just the whole experience was just exceptional.
Okay, so I was actually going to ask you about day 4 in particular, so I'll do that now. I mean, you're a mountain professional. You know what it means to and what's required to stay, safe in the mountains.
Yeah.
What experience, what approaches did you bring to day 4? And I just add to anyone who doesn't know, the Cape Wrath Ultra this year was very wet. Pretty much all the other editions have been wall-to-wall sunshine, and this year we had wall-to-wall rain, and it made it really hard for everybody on the event. But day 4 stands out because it just lashed it down. It was cold and wet all day. It was really challenging conditions. So Ben, how did you manage that?
I think the key thing with that, specifically with the day 4, is that the kit requirements that are laid out are there for those reasons when you have a day like that. So like the idea of thinking that you could skimp or like kind of get the lightest possible jacket or whatever to sort of make your bag really light, I would suggest that you go and get a jacket that is going to actually work and function. Because if you had one of these really lightweight jackets that's as thin as a fly's wing, it's probably not going to last on those types of conditions. So, that kit list is there for a very good reason. So being prepared and having all that kit helped with feeling that a little bit more comfortable whenever the conditions really turned against you, and having those kind of warm synthetic layers to add onto was definitely kind of the savior of the day for something as hard and as challenging as that day.
Okay, I mean that sounds like very good advice. So Bridget, the question to you, kind of reflecting back on Dragon's Back, what were your highlights?
I have to say, I think it was about day 4. I was running along and I suddenly thought, I'm sure when this week's finished, I will have really enjoyed it. So don't think that it's going to be your holiday. I try and think of these events as an all-inclusive holiday, but it is tough as you're going through. But there were some great things. I was thinking about what my highlights might be, and do you know what? Turning the corner and seeing the blue tents on day 1, and I was going to sleep in the blue tents of the Dragon's Back. It was akin to the Bake Off tent to me. It's the runner's equivalent. Apart from you get a sneaky little side look just as you're crossing the road before you go and do the Snowdon Horseshoe. And but yeah, seeing those tents and no one is going to sleep there. That was a strange highlight. And then as you're running along, I suppose I always look forward to the next mountain. When you get to know the mountains, I've been on the recce runs that I've done, and it's kind of nice to look forward to them and experience them in whatever the weather's going to throw you that day. That was nice. And I think my confidence was growing as the week went through as well. But also the terrain gets a bit easier until day 5. So you're in your pace as that goes through. And just on the very last day, I was running with a guy called Nicholas, and we came to, there's a trig, and just beyond the trig you can see Cardiff, you can see the sea, and you just think, I've traversed Wales, it's amazing. And it was sunny, it was really, really nice. Yeah, in fact, behind the trig there was a marshal, and the sun was out, it was glorious, and the marshal was doing some yoga pose in a very sleepy sort of position, and I was desperately trying to dib my dibber without trying to wake them up, but I didn't manage it. I think I was just probably whooping for joy at that time.
Excellent. I certainly know exactly where you mean when you that trig point and you can see the south coast of Wales. And it's this, I mean, obviously I haven't done the race, but when I was recceing day 6 and we were changing the course, and the first time I ran to that trig point and I saw the view, and I was like, oh yes, this we just have to come this way. It all kind of just makes sense when you're there. So Ben, jumping back to you, and maybe you've already answered this question actually, but what was the most challenging bit of Cape Wrath Ultra for you?
Yeah, so I think I was just kind of thinking back to this as well, and I think day 6 was definitely kind of getting into that section of day 6 was definitely a challenge, because I guess it's probably overall the flatter day. There's not much elevation within that, so it's quite long, and it just kind of seemed to keep going and going and going. So that mentally was definitely a challenge. But it was such a good day as well. It takes you through some amazing parts there. And it was just pretty spectacular. But that was definitely a mental challenge, kind of day 6. So it was. And then day 7, I think that kind of second half of day 7, whenever you cross checkpoint 2 and you come round, and then there's just a long section that kind of hugs along the little locks there.
Yeah.
And on the map, it very clearly marks it as a trail, but it's more like a bit of a trod. And it was quite boggy when we did it, and it just kind of keep going and going, and you think, I must be near the end of this now, and you kind of round a corner and you're like, oh no, it keeps going, and then you eventually hit the road and you're like, thank goodness for that. And then you think, right, I must be at those blue tents, I gotta look out for those blue tents. And then you just see this sign, 4 miles to go, and it's like, oh, right, another mental barrier to push through. And you're on the road, and it's just that slow drag, that slow climb up, but you kind of forget about the pain because the scenery around you is just pretty spectacular. And once you hit that rise, you get that sharp short downhill, and then the tents are just there, and you're like, thank goodness for that. So that's just such a welcome relief to see that blue tent. So that kind of later stage was definitely hard. So it was, yeah.
I think that the end of day 7 along the road is probably one of the most picturesque. It's almost 10k, isn't it? You could possibly do. It is really quite wonderful, that journey.
Yeah.
Okie doke. So well, let's jump on to Kit, and maybe we'll go to Bridget. I'm wondering whether we're going to get some more show and tell here. But great. So the question we'd like to ask is, perhaps you could talk through the kit that you've used, and also mention anything you found particularly useful or that you would recommend to others.
Okay. I already had a lot of kit. My husband will agree with that. But it's amazing how much more I ended up buying in the year as your kit wears out, because you're training in it all the time, and you're just fine tuning what you want. So it's you've got to test everything out. I think clothing wise, I even knew exactly what top I wanted to wear. I wanted something with something on my neck and a zip, and I just wore a very technical fabric top. That was great. For the girls out there, I bought the most expensive bra I ever intend to buy. Loved it so much, bought a second one, and I didn't regret one penny of that. I'll show you the material, but don't worry, it's not a lacy number. It's right. So very well used. It's really thin, and it's a Salomon NSO bra, I think, or some it's got 3 initials in it.
Yeah.
Outrageously expensive, worth every penny. I wore one for 3 days, then I took it off, and then I wore the other one for the next 3 days. And if I'd only had one, I could have worn it for the full 6 days. And it's because when I stop, I start to shiver an awful lot, and that's because your top's wicked away perfectly, but your underwear is just rubbish material usually. And I've got so many running underwear type things, and none of them match that material. Shorts wise, I just wore shorts that I've bought from TK Maxx in the end, actually, but they're really comfortable. They're tried and tested, and I knew if it rained and then it dried, I'd be okay. And again, I just wore one pair of shorts for 3 days. Oh no, one pair of shorts for 5 days, and then I changed for the last day because I knew I was coming into Cardiff. Jacket wise, I was really lucky actually, because I was doing a gear review for the Montane Spine jacket, and I think that's the one you recommend, Shane.
It's one of,
And
yes, it is.
yes, I can't, honestly, you pay your money, you do get the stuff. So the spine jacket, lovely colour for the photos. It's so lightweight. This is the material. It's so lightweight. It's so good in bad weather. I went up in the Peak District. The weather was that bad that day. And in the Peak, I couldn't believe it kept me warm in the wind. And it's still beading up now. And it's been trashed in the bottom of bags and things like that. But then suddenly I was thinking, okay, I carry my waterproof everywhere. But what if it's just a bit cold? And I wanted a windproof that was waterproof, so that I wouldn't necessarily have to keep getting my jacket out, because I always layer up with my long sleeve top, and then I have a windproof, which is really breathable, and then I always have my waterproof. But I then bought, a few people had these. It's the S-Lab NSO thing again. There you go. I felt like I was going to an Oasis concert wearing it. It's not the most attractive thing. And it was quite expensive for a windproof, but it actually turned out to be absolutely awesome. So I could wear it as a windproof. And when it rained, I never actually got my Montane Spine jacket out. I just kept my waterproof windproof on. But I have to say, it took until day 5 for me to have the confidence only to take that jacket out, because it does have tape seams. I would still always recommend taking the your proper outer layer as well. But that top's been really good. It kind of sits at the bottom of my sack now for when I need it. The only trouble with that one is it's not big enough. You have to get quite a floppy one to go over your bag.
Do you know, sorry, Bridget, I was just going to say, listening to what you're saying here, the thing that comes across loud and clear to me is that you've tested this kit. So before you got to Dragon's Back, even if it was your TK Maxx shorts, you knew they worked for you and they were the right thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's always the case of, after it's rained, how quickly do they dry? And are they going to smell? I mean, you don't want that smell hanging around for 6 days. Yeah, you've got to try and test all your stuff. In fact, I bought, knowing that the kit wouldn't fit in my the bag that I like, my running vest, the sack, I went and bought a new one. And then just before the Dragon's Back, I thought it's just not going to be comfortable packing everything into the size I've got. So I stayed with the brand and bought the slightly bigger version, which just also happened, I was brave and bought the women's version, and that was the best thing ever, because it fitted my back much better. So it did fit all my kit in much easier, but it didn't slosh around on my back, and that extra comfort just made a huge amount of difference.
Great. Oh, that's really great insights. And Ben, perhaps we could ask you the same question. So geeky kit questions, what would you recommend? What did you do that works for you?
Yeah, so for me, I'll kind of start with my feet. So I wore for the 8 days the Innovate Terra Ultra G280, whatever it is. They're kind of their ultra distance shoe. I think it's now called the Trail Fly or something. They've rebranded it. But it's the same shoe. And I took 2 pairs of shoes with me, but wore the same pair the entire 8 days. And I just had 8 pairs of socks. I just changed my socks out every day. And then at the camp, I get my shoes a wash and a clean because they were muddy. Took the insoles out and just started to try and get everything aired out and dry. Even if you get the insoles dry, and your shoes are a bit damp, at least you're putting your foot back onto a dry base with dry socks. And that kind of psychologically as well, it feels quite nice for your feet, because your feet do get trashed. So it's just trying to look after them as best as possible. So that's kind of the shoe of choice that I wear for all my long runs. I've probably gone through about 7 or 8 pairs of those shoes. And then just a good quality pair of running socks. I know some people love like merino and things. Personally, I just find that too itchy for my feet. So I think the company that I've got is Viking. So just Sports Pursuit or something, like, they surprisingly were actually really good quality socks. There's another company called Darn Tough, and they make walking socks. And they are phenomenal socks. Like they're brilliant. So I'd recommend them as a good sock. I think maybe they're merino, but they're the ones that don't kind of itch my feet as much. And then I pretty much wore shorts the whole week, kind of the Salomon S-Lab, whatever you call them. They're kind of their modular shorts that you can sort of then chop and change whatever you wear underneath. And then the best pair of boxers I had was like actually Arc'teryx have these phenomenal boxers, and they were the comfiest things ever to wear underneath of them. And I had a couple of pairs of those, and I think I just maybe had like 4 pairs of boxers. So it's kind of the usual guy thing, wear them twice, turn them inside out, wear them twice again, that sort of thing, and stick the same pair of shorts over the top. And then I had a couple of Salomon short sleeve and long sleeve thermals, and then maybe a slightly thicker one for those colder days to go on top of that as well. And then my synthetic layer was a Montane. I can't remember the name of it, but it was a kind of a Montane synthetic jacket then for when it was really cold. And then my outer layer was again a Salomon waterproof. I think it was the Benatti Pro jacket as well. And then similar to yourself, Bridget, I had like kind of a Gore-Tex Shake Dry jacket as well, a little bit more expensive, but it was this for then an extra layer when it got really kind of full on. And like it only worked because it was tried and tested, just going out on my runs, making sure I knew how to use it and making sure it actually worked, so testing it all before you go out, or sign up for any of these races, I think is key.
Yeah, I think again, as Bridget was saying, it's clear that both of you have used that kit lots and lots before you've turned up at the race. And I got to be honest, as a race director, when I see someone turn up in obviously like brand new shoes or something like that, my heart does sink a little bit, and I'm like, oh dear, they're going to be in for a tough time. Okay, so I think what we've talked about so far is lots of things that have gone pretty well for you both in terms of your preparation and your kit. But having done Cape Wrath and Dragon's Back, is there anything you think you'd like to have done differently when you reflect on it now? And maybe Bridget will maybe ask you that first.
If anything, I wish I'd enjoyed the start a bit more than I did. I was just so small and nervous in a crowd of big male runners, and I have to say the atmosphere is absolutely amazing with hindsight, but when you're feeling very timid on the start line, the atmosphere is all encompassing, absolutely fearful. And then when the Welsh Voice Choir strike up, oh my goodness, it's just the most emotional moment you'll ever have. And I cope with it by singing along, because luckily song 2 was an old campfire song, and song 3 was You'll Never Walk Alone. And there was this lad, Chris, stood next to me, and he went, just go with it, just go with it. And anyway, I ran into him later on in the race, and I said, oh, thanks for that slap on the face at the start, it's just what I needed. But if you're on your own and you don't know anybody in the hundreds that are stood there, just think back. Good things happen after the start, and it's dark, and you're feeling a little bit timid, but God, it should have been exciting. I think I was just so nervous, it was untrue.
Yeah, I think you've just touched on something interesting there, because I was chatting with Kirsty Reid, who did Dragon's Back and Cape Wrath, and Dragon's Back. Sorry, yeah. Of course, we were talking about the start of Dragon's Back, and she was talking about as a female participant how intimidating it is being there when there's so many, disproportionate number of male participants, and there's the male bravado that you do see. And maybe as a female in the minority, how that is an intimidating environment. And it's something I've been pondering as a race organizer about, how that environment feels a bit more welcoming to the female participants. And I mean, let's put this in context as well. Bridget, you were 18th overall. So of all those hundreds and hundreds of blokes, you basically smashed them to bits over the next 6 days. So
I know. I think it's the race meant so much to me. I don't
Mhm.
think it's you that needs to worry about it being welcoming. I think it's me and my attitude to the race. Someone early on in day one said, "Are you competing or competing?" And I didn't answer it because I knew damn well I was there to compete. Do you know what? It's all about being the best you are. And I think that's why without the adrenaline on the start, how are you going to put your all into it? And it meant so much. I was there to be the best of what I could do.
Brilliant.
So you know what? If I probably went back next year, I'd hopefully feel a bit better, but I'd still be you must be anxious.
Yeah, I think
I
if
mean,
you're not nervous, something's wrong.
yeah. And those blokes stood on the front line. They just perhaps don't talk about it afterwards, whereas I do. And all the fell races I do, it's disproportionately male to female, so you get used to it.
So Ben, can we jump to you and ask you the same question about, on reflection, is there things that you would have done differently?
Yeah, I think in terms of like, if I was to pick, one example of my training, if I was to do something different there, I would have incorporated a lot more strength training, because that was one area that I didn't do enough of. And that is just kind of like everything from ankles, knees, and hips and core, because long time in your feet in terms of just running, that you're going to get tired, and you just need to have that strength in all of those joints, because they will have an increased amount of load and wear and tear on them. Quite a big high volume quickly just goes like that, because your training volume may be sort of gradual and have wee lumps and bumps throughout your training program, but any of these races, it all of a sudden just does this, that workload and all those joints. So definitely a lot more kind of strength training specific to building up endurance in ligaments and joints was something I wish I could have done more of and didn't do enough of. In terms of actually being in the race and being there, I got to know everyone in my tent really well. And we kind of ended up forming a little bubble in the evenings and having a chat, around how your day went. And one thing I wish I had done more of was chat to more people. There was so many people there. I just didn't feel that I spent enough time asking how others were, how their day go, and just getting to know more people, and I wish I had spent more time doing that, because there was so many people from interesting backgrounds, from not just from the UK, from far afield. I think there's maybe South Africa and other places as well. And I wish I just sort of got to know some of those people more, and just wanted to know what they thought of Scotland and why they came. So yeah, that was something I wish I had done more of.
I certainly find it kind of overwhelming, the sheer number of people and different languages, different countries, different experiences. And as the race organizer, I spend quite a lot of time wandering around trying to chat to people, and it's one of the rich experiences of being at the event, and certainly something that I really enjoy doing. I've seen quite a few questions coming in on the chat, or certainly a couple, about overnight camps. So I think it's really interesting. I think your frame of reference is really important. So for me, as a runner who's done events like the and these kind of traditional mountain marathon events, I'm used to squeezing two blokes into a super lightweight one person tent and suffering through a night so we can be as minimal as possible, as light as possible. So the idea of being in one of these gigantic blue tents feels incredibly luxurious to me. But then that's my frame of reference. And I think if you're not used to camping, it can be quite an intimidating experience to be in the blue tents with perhaps people you don't know. So Bridget, perhaps you could talk about your experience at the blue tents, the overnight camps, how you kind of manage yourself.
Well, I've camped all my life from being newborn. So the big blue tents are a luxury all-inclusive holiday for me because they were put up. But having 8 people in the tents is quite interesting because you're shoulder to shoulder with people, and it is a chance to get to know people in your tent. you know, it's what level of comfort you want there. So I definitely had a good enough sleeping bag that I had to vent because it was too warm at night. So that was nice. I don't bother with a pillow, but I was quite comfortable with that because I just use my coat, I think. Apart from one day, I'd lent on my bottle, which I'd pre-filled for the morning, and it went all over my coat, and then it stunk of tropical juice for the rest of the week, which was not that pleasant. But people, I think, also talk about camp faff. You've got to be organised. And I appreciate I was in camp early enough to be organised. And if you're in camp late, you're probably not thinking about being organised for the next day. But the big tents, it was great. It had space to quickly unpack everything, repack your kit for the next day, and then start repacking your overnight bag so that in the morning, all you do is you put your sleeping bag away and your pot bag once you've had your breakfast and your mat, and that was it. You know, it minimize the faff in the morning. But when I finished my runs in my recce's, I'd get back to the car, have a protein shake, and you know, you're supposed to have your protein within the first half hour. That all goes out the window. You're so tired when you get back to the tents. You sprawl about on the on your sleeping bag, and you just have a little bit of a rest. And then everyone says take a bag that's big enough to carry all your camp kit around with you. My bag was only just big enough, so I'd take just a nice big shoulder bag that you can just throw all your pots in and your tea towel and your stuff that you're going to prepare for your next day's run. So like your water bottles, I had them prepared by the end of my tea time and things like that. So that once you go to the tent once, you leave the tent once for your tea and your whatevers, and then you come back and then you go to bed. And that's how I reduce camp faff. But you're right, Ben, that in the big tent, I sat on the bean bags, which were fantastic, and chatted to people I'd seen during the day and really enjoyed that. But I probably didn't speak to that many people because I was just a bit tired. And I did get into a nice, easy just timetable of what I did. I had my little routine and just ate and then went to bed about 8 o'clock, I think, 8, half 8 most days.
Okay, that sounds good advice. Having the routine kind of dialed in is important. Ben, so perhaps you could tell us about your experience at the overnight camps.
Yeah, I think again, same as Bridget, I've been in a very lucky position to have been camping and going on expeditions since I was a kid. So I'm very comfortable being confined to a small space and managing in that. So the bigger tents are definitely, oh, this kind of feels like home a little bit. You know, it's luxurious. I can actually stand up. But I think you're absolutely right. You know, having some form of structure to what you do, having a like being able to sort out your personal admin and practicing all that at home, you know, how to like pack your bag in an order that you've then not have to pull everything out because something's buried at the very bottom of that big 80-litre Ortlieb dry bag that's part of the kit requirement. So being able to get comfortable with packing that every day the same way, so that kind of the last things that go in would be your sleeping stuff and maybe, you know, your protein shake at the top. So whenever you get that bag at the end of the day, the first things that come out of it would be, for me, like a protein shake and all my sleeping kit that then gets laid out. And then what's next would be, you know, some food and then other things to get changed into out of my running kit. And then having just having it structured so that, you know, the next thing that comes out is the next thing that you need in terms of importance. And that only came from actually practicing packing the bag at home and maybe having it packed, going out for a run and then coming back, kind of simulating what I would need to do after I had been for a run, pulling everything out and then putting that into practice. And just getting comfortable with that, because then if what you have in mind actually doesn't work, you can tweak it at home and fine tune it, then come race day. But kind of some of that stuff went out the window, you know, at the end of the day, because you end up getting distracted by chatting to someone else, or you're that hungry that you got to go and get your chips first of all. But doing your best to be bothered to following that structure works, and it just cuts down that faff time that Bridget was saying about.
Yeah, it's interesting when we look at the feedback after the events, we'll always have, you know, 1 or 2, possibly 3 people who will say, blue tent's worst experience of my life. You know, it was small and it was difficult and I didn't have enough space and blah, blah, blah. But overwhelmingly, participants say to us, blue tents, amazing. The camaraderie of the tent mates, you know, I've made friends for life, and actually putting people together in that environment is part of that whole kind of bonding experience of getting to know the other participants. And yeah, whilst there are a few people who always find it difficult, I think having that background of being camping and being used to being in tents is really helpful. I like the idea of practicing in advance, going out for a run and coming back to your dry bag kind of packed and deciding what you need. Excuse my sniffing. I'm kind of got this cold going on here. So
Shane,
the
I
next
was
question.
going to mention to people, I took 2 flannels because I thought they'd make a handy towel, and I promised myself I'd go to the river every day and have a wash. I did that on day 1 and that was it. And then day 2, I just went to bed. But day 3, I thought, haha. So I wet 1 flannel and kept it in a bag, and I kept my dry flannel. And my only hygiene in the week was I washed my feet every night with my wet flannel and then dried them with my dry flannel. And that was just lucky that I took 2 flannels. And that was a really good, that's a top tip from me.
That sounds good. I think we could probably do an entire webinar just about looking after your feet. There is actually some really good advice on the website. There's a guidance article about foot care. So I'm not going to go down not just a rabbit hole, but like it's a massive excavation hole, that one.
Yeah.
So we'll leave that. So I guess I've got 2 more questions, and then we're going to jump into picking up any of the Q&A that we've not covered. So Bridget first, any advice that you would give to someone who was thinking about taking part? What would you say to someone about the Dragon's Back?
It's if you've got any inkling to do it, just do it. It's massive and it's worth it totally. Be organized, get out and look at the terrain, and just love Wales because it's just amazing. Yeah, and enjoy the training as well. It's not just about the race, it's about the whole year's build up of training and good memories. And on the race, you look back to all the recce runs that you've done and you smile because you've had a great time. You're really lucky to be in a position of even thinking of entering the race, really.
And Ben, in terms of Cape Wrath Ultra, what would you say?
Yeah, I would certainly mirror that advice, and you know, just do your best to enjoy the whole process, and do acknowledge the fact that there are times that it's going to hurt in the training and that there is going to be suffering, but know that it pays off in the end, and that the whole experience is a phenomenal experience, you know. And I would certainly say for kind of the day 1, a very specific piece of advice I would give was that in the morning, whenever you have your breakfast and you walk to the start, and then you get walked to getting the little boat across Loch Linnhe, which is quite a fun experience as well. So that's quite memorable. And then getting to the start line, that whole process, you know, is quite a long time without having any food. And I definitely had started feeling a little bit hungry. I know you get sort of tea, coffee, and there's some biscuits and stuff that you can have at the start, but I was definitely kind of aware of that. My breakfast was probably about 3 hours ago. So for day 1, take those extra bits of food just to top up whilst you're standing around waiting for the start. And then sort of the rest of the day will feel more comfortable. So that's kind of a bit of a specific bit of advice that we give to anyone there. But just, you know, get out, get training, enjoy it, and maybe change your mentality to knowing that it's going to hurt, and just try and expand your bandwidth of being uncomfortable, you know, and maybe kind of redefine what you think being uncomfortable is at times, because, you know, you have to have that mental capacity to want to finish. And I would say that's a big part of it. It's not just the physical aspect, it's that psychological and mental game that you've got to play with yourself to know that you can do it and you can push yourself more than what you're capable of.
I think those are some really excellent insights, and there's a few insights I guess I would share from having spoken to hundreds of participants now. And I think where the real value in Dragon's Back and Cape Wrath is not the moment of finishing, but it's the entire process of making the commitment to do the event, the building up and the training, and in kind of growing as a runner, building your confidence, building the mileage, and that if you can enjoy the process, you'll come to the start line prepared. And I've already said that there's no guarantees for anybody, but the one thing I would say is every year we see people who, you know, they don't have the race that they had wanted. Something possibly goes wrong for them. Maybe they pick up an injury and they leave disappointed. And I'm really quite clear with participants now that if they can possibly stay on and do our Explore or Hatchling courses, they can still get enormous value out of that week away. And we've always offered these kind of like half a Dragon or half a Cape Wrath options, but we've never really advertised that as an option for people. And what we're doing next year is we have a very dedicated choice in that you can choose to do the reduced course called the Hatchling in the Dragon's Back or the Explorer for the Cape Wrath. So even if your race doesn't work out as you had hoped, there is a fallback option, and the fallback option is still blooming awesome because you get to have a running holiday, enjoy the camaraderie of the overnight camp, and really have a wonderful time. Eleanor, perhaps can we invite you in now? And Eleanor, my colleague, has been kind of trawling through Q&A. Hi, Eleanor.
Hello.
Right, so
I've been collecting all of your questions for Bridget, Ben and Shane, so I will ask some of these now. So first up, I'm going to ask Bridget this one, seeing as you had a lot to say about the food. Did you try all of this food in advance? Was any of it just kind of a last minute thing, or had you tested it all?
Absolutely. Everything was tested many times before, and I would never entertain taking something out for the first time. Yeah, I knew exactly how much I liked it and for how long it would keep me going for. And I'd done the Paddy Buckley in the year, so it was really well tested then when I think I struggled eating more on the Paddy Buckley than I did in the whole of the Dragon's Back.
Very good. Do you have anything to add to that, Ben?
Yeah, no, I can just agree with that. Yeah, any food that I took with me was all stuff that I knew worked for me from past races or just long training runs that I took out and experimented with on my training runs. And like, you know, I've done sort of assisted on some of the legs for the Ramsey round. I've done a Dennis Rankin round back in Ireland, and you know, kind of took stuff on that as well that I knew worked. So yeah, kind of testing everything before is definitely the way forward rather than trying anything new on your race.
We've had quite a lot of talk about the blue tent specifically, but we've had a few questions specifically about sleeping. Do you have any tips for managing to sleep overnight after those long days in the blue tents? Ben, shall we start with you?
Yeah, I think I would say, you know, invest in getting a good quality sleeping mat and sleeping bag. You can get these like super lightweight Thermarest mattresses. They're great, but they're quite narrow. And I have a tendency to roll around a lot in my sleep, so I opted for something that was a little bit wider and a little bit thicker, because that extra thickness adds a lot more warmth, because the closer you are to the ground, obviously that steals more heat and you can get a little bit colder. So having something thicker just makes you that more warmer, as well as a good quality sleeping bag. Earplugs as well is a big thing, because you just don't know who you're going to get, who could be someone who snores like a train. So yeah, earplugs are a good investment, and maybe practicing sleeping with them so you kind of feel comfortable having something stuffed in your ears.
Nice. Bridget, did you have any tips about sleeping?
I didn't take earplugs, and I think I would do next time. And also, if you can't sleep, just close your eyes and relax. Don't look at your watch. And you know, relaxing's almost as good as sleeping, and don't stress about it. It's You are going to lose sleep, and sleep deprivation brings on emotional waves that you've never experienced before. Have a good blubber at about 7 to 7:30 in the morning as you're running along, and enjoy it because it's part of the experience. I made a phone call to one of my friends, and I was like, "Oh, it's so beep hard," and it was great. It was so funny afterwards when she played it back to me, and it's fine. Just stay in the office.
Perhaps, Eleanor, I can just add to that is that, again, as the race organizer, it would be very unusual if I got through a day at an event without somebody coming and crying on my shoulder. And it's actually about a 50-50 mix between participants and event crew.
Yeah, it's true. So we've talked quite a lot about feet, and like we say, we don't want to risk falling into a rabbit hole too much. But I think this one's specifically directed at Ben. Any specific tips for coping with wet feet over 8 days?
Again, I'm going to count myself very lucky that through my entire career working in the outdoors, I have never suffered from big blisters. I've maybe had the odd wee hot spot and things, so I'm very lucky in that. The Cape Wrath changed that. It was the thing that produced blisters that I never thought possible. But I think the key thing is, like, as soon as you get to camp, get that wet stuff off, let your feet air out, you know, give them a good clean, get all that grime and dirt off them. And then, you know, spend that little bit of extra time tending to what is a little bit hot and uncomfortable. You know, if there's blisters, maybe I wouldn't say cut skin away, maybe leave it as a bit of as a protective barrier. And then once it's really kind of nice and dry, just wrap things up carefully and keep your feet as dry as possible. Like, if I were to take anything different for footwear around the campsite, it would not be Crocs. Crocs are great, you know, because they're nice and wide and comfortable, but there's so many holes in them that walking through fields and things, your feet just get wet. So something a bit more protective. You know, I know I saw some people walk around with, like, you know, plastic bags in their feet and then kind of into their Crocs, and that was like, oh, that's kind of a clever idea for like kind of makeshift waterproof socks. You know, so just keeping your feet dry at the end of each day.
Yeah, that's true. I have actually posted the link to our guidance on foot care in the chat, so that might be worth checking out if anyone's particularly interested in foot care. And it has all sorts of stuff about dealing with blisters and preparing your feet before coming to the event as well. So I'd definitely recommend checking that out. So I'm going to ask both of you this question, but we'll start with Bridget. What volume of running vest did you use?
I think it's 17 litres, but to be honest, just go by the guidance in the kit list. And you were dead right there, Shane. I bought a bag that I thought I could get away with because I'm a little person, and I ended up buying the volume that you suggest on the website.
Okay.
And Ben, what do you go for?
Yeah. I had a Salomon 10-litre bag for each day. And I found that was, you know, big enough for the kit that I was carrying, that I know that I can use for myself. But everybody's different, you know, so you might find that, you know, you need a slightly bigger bag, you know, because you're taking maybe that extra layer or a slightly thicker layer. But, you know, my systems, and I know that what works for me, a 10-litre bag was ideal. But you'd need to get really comfortable with knowing how to use it, because some of these bags have these little kangaroo pockets that are kind of, you know, tucked away at the back. And if you're not as flexible as me, you know, or if you're more flexible than me, that it's easier to get to, but you know, it's really hard to try and get to some of these pockets sometimes. So get comfortable with knowing how to use the kit.
Yep, that's definitely very good advice. So this is actually the final question that I've got for you both. What volume of walking did you do versus running on the course? And we get this question quite a lot. So we'll start with Bridget.
I usually have the mantra that you walk the hills and you run the rest, but you don't literally run the rest, because sometimes you do feel a bit tired. But generally, yeah, walk the hills, and then you can play games with yourself. Is it a hill or is it an incline? If it's an incline, you still got to run it. But yeah, that suits. And when I run, it's kind of like a chatty sort of pace, so it's never too fast. Yeah, that's all I go by. And it's, when I started on the Dragon's Back, I know the pace I can go at and I can last at all day, so that works for me. Oh,
Ben?
sorry, I should add, I
Oh.
can't run all the downhills, the really technical downhills. Don't worry if someone overtakes you running downhill, because you know, it's the end of day one going down into camp is really steep and tricky, and I usually trot down that, but on the race day, I definitely walked all that bit, and I think that paid dividends during the week as well.
And Ben?
Yeah, I kind of think maybe like the Cape Wrath, in terms of what's runnable and what's actually open moorland and deer trods and bog. It's just hard to run through that type of environment. So any opportunity that you've got a good track that you know, actually, yeah, I can run this, I would run it. Where stuff that is just going to sap your energy, just kind of walk, because there's no point in wasting energy trying to run through terrain that your brain is telling you just walk, because you know it's not going to do you any favors. And definitely with Bridget's advice, you know, walking up those long, steeper hills rather than trying to waste energy running up it, because you know you're just as quick and more efficient probably by walking. And then any downhills, if it's kind of technical downhill, your brain's probably going to be that little bit more on the tired side, so concentration is a lot harder, and that's maybe where a wee slip, trip, or a fall could end in disaster. So downhills that are manageable and easy, yeah, you could trot down them. Things that feel a bit more technical, probably just walking down them, because you want to save your legs.
That's great, thanks. So that's all the questions I had. So I'll hand back over to Shane.
Okay, well, thanks, Eleanor. So I think we'll just wrap up there. It's a nice logical place to finish. I'd like to say a big thank you to Bridget and Ben for giving up their evenings to share their really incredible, useful insights. If you're considering taking part and you know someone who's done one of these races before, invite them around for dinner and get everything you can from them in terms of information. My colleague Eleanor, who's at home working in the spare bedroom, I actually came into the office this evening to do this because I just love all the pictures on our wall here. It's always the best place to sit for a webinar. Just a few final things on both the Dragon's Back and the Cape Wrath Ultra website. There is loads and loads of guidance articles. So if you're not sure about something, you're pondering it, have a look on the websites. We've got a really active community on the 2 Facebook groups for the participants. So again, great place to ask questions. And then if you have something specific for us, you can email us, you can do some online chatting, you can arrange a video call, and we'll be doing all of this again 10th of January with 2 other participants, and we'll be going through a deep dive into their experiences of these 2 races. So yeah, we'll finish there, and I just would like to say, yeah, just emphasize my thanks to everybody for turning up this evening, and hopefully I will see some of you, Bridget, I think at Cape Wrath maybe.
I am in training. Yes, I can't stay away.
But my spies are telling me that that you're heading to Cape Wrath to Scotland this year. Okay, well, thanks everybody. It's been a good evening. Have a wonderful kind of festive break, and we'll see you in the new year. Okay, cheers.
That's good.
Thanks
Thanks
all.
very much. Bye. Bye.
Bye.